Hey, good morning guys. James over here at Tulsa Sod and Mulch. With the crew today, we're going to plant some trees on a bank up here to kind of screen a neighbor. And I'm going to show you guys how you properly plant a tree. We're planting some pine trees today, and I'm going to show you the proper way to do it. The main thing you want to look for first is what kind of soil you're planting the tree into. We have a rule of thumb we go by, and it's plant them high, they don't die. If you're in really sandy soil with a lot of drainage, you can plant the tree closer to level to the ground. But if it's any kind of clay or loam or something that's going to retain water, you want to plant that tree up and out of the ground just a little bit. Sometimes we put about a third of the root ball up out of the ground. And the theory of that is water, runs away from the top of that root ball and doesn't get wet feet. When we say wet feet, we mean get root rot, or the tree's just sit in the water all the time. The tree will die for sure. 100% will die. A good rule of thumb also too is dig your hole 2 to 3 times the size of the root ball. And why you want to do that is to get that enough space for like real sandier soil or like loose soil, so when the roots start growing, it's easy to grow through where you dug that big hole. That way you don't just dig a hole the size of the root ball, roots start growing, they just hit like a roadblock in the hard ground. So we try to dig the root ball 2-3 times as big. So these trees here, we're going to tree stake. We'll put T-post, and what we like to do is put a T-post on the north side of it and the south side of it, because the winds come out of the north, winds come out of the south normally, the strongest. So that's typically how we put our T-posts in the ground. We use these T-straps. I'm going to show you here in this video here in just a second that we go around the tree. The number one thing I see guys do wrong is when they tree strap a tree, they don't put the tree strap on top of a branch or a limb. They put it just on the trunk. And what happens is when the wind blows out of the south, the other side of the strap will fall down. When the wind blows out of the north, the strap will fall down. I'll give you a better example of that here in a minute, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here's these tree straps we use. As you can see here, this tree strap, you want to put it on top of a limb so it doesn't slide down. You don't want it sliding down the trunk of this tree. If you put that tree strap just around the trunk right here, when the tree goes this way, it's going to fall down. The tree goes this way, it's going to fall down. So you always want to make sure you put it on top of a branch somewhere, so when it pulls tight, it won't slide down. Here's some small pines we're going to plant today. Not very big, like 7 foot tall. We're at a storage unit. They're going to plant these to try to screen. So the other thing we do, we always plant a compost. We normally put 1 to 2 bags mixed in with all the soil. I like to use cotton burr compost. It's a really good compost. We'll mix that in the hole with the soil, and then we'll come back and put mulch on top of that. Come over here and show you guys. We started digging these holes by hand. These root balls are pretty small. Sometimes we use a machine and an auger to dig a really big hole. But this particular project, these root balls are pretty small, so we're just gonna dig them by hand. Give you an idea, just like I said, dig about 2 to 3 times the size of the root ball, and then we'll build us a mound around it, like a little moat around this tree to retain water before we put the mulch in. Another thing I'm pretty big on doing is these trees here, where spacing is about 20 feet apart, right down a fence line. I like to measure and make everything real symmetrical and just look really nice. So I just took the measurement of what we're doing here, divided by how many trees and how much equal spacing. So this one ended up being about 19-foot spacing. That way everything's really nice, straight. We'll measure off this fence about 6 feet. Every single one will measure exactly with the tape measure, 6 foot off, and then our width, just to make it look good and symmetrical, and just take some pride in what you do there. These guys came through here and flagged first, marked the ground, measured it off, start digging the holes first, and we'll come start planting. We took our compost here, and he's taking the dirt he dug the hole out of. He's mixing this compost around. That way everything we backfill is going to have a mixture of compost and the soil together. This is a cotton burr compost. It's typically what we use for all our landscape. Got our first tree here. See there, root ball is just a little bit low. We're going to raise it up and backfill it with our compost and soil blend. Another thing we do is we kind of pack it in tight around it. Just turn your shovel upside down, kind of pack it tight. So we make these little tree rings. One thing that's really important to know is you never put any dirt on any tree on the above the root ball. Like, you kill a tree really quick by putting dirt up on top of the trunk of the tree. Good rule of thumb on a mature tree is never put more than 1 to 2 inches on the trunk. Like, you'll suffocate a tree and kill it for sure. But you can kind of see here, we got this moat built around it. That way when you do water, the water kind of stays in that moat. But the root ball itself is above the ground. It's kind of hard to see here, but that root ball is probably 3-4 inches maybe above the level of the ground. So that way you get the water, good drainage. Trees like really good drainage. Last, we come in here and put some mulch. We typically use hardwood mulch most of the time. It's kind of like our go-to. And whole reason for mulch is retain water. When you do water it, it retains it and also protects it, insulates it from the freeze come wintertime. You can see making a little moat there. Same thing. Once water gets in there, it kind of sits in there like a moat and slowly drains into the tree. When you water these trees, the best way to do this if you don't have irrigation is you take your hose from your house and lay that hose on top of it, and you barely open the hose. I mean, just barely where it drips. And you want to drip irrigation on trees and maybe drip for 2 or 3 hours. That way it slowly gets down into that root ball. If you just come up and water on top of it for 5 or 10 seconds, the water is just going to run off the top. It'll never get down the bottom of that root ball. So the best way, like I say, is just get you a hose, set the end of the hose right next to the trunk of the tree, barely crank it up, and just let it drip 2, 3, 4 hours. Got these T-posts in. Like I was saying earlier, we got these on the north side of the tree and the south side of the tree because statistically, that's where the wind's always going to come. More north, more south. Some guys put a third one, make a triangle out of them. We typically just do one on the north, one on the south. One thing I'll say about the tree stakes is a lot of controversy about it, actually. Some guys swear by no tree stakes. They say that the tree will be stronger if it fights the wind constantly. These pine trees, though, I always put stakes no matter what, just because they're so flimsy. They grow really tall, really skinny. They need tree stakes. But there's times when, you know, we plant an oak or a maple and we might not put tree stakes. It just kind of depends, too, is how big the tree is. If you start with like a 3 or 4 inch big strong tree, you probably don't need the tree stakes. But if you got a 1 inch tree, 1.5 inches, 2 inch, something kind of flimsy, first year or so you might put tree stakes on it and then take the tree stakes off. Got these tree straps put on here. Like I said, you always want to put them on top of a branch, and we kind of twist them. You can kind of see there, we twist them back to put some tension on there. But this is a finished tree right here. Got tree stakes, got our compost inside, got our mulch, got our tree ring so water will sit on there. So that's how we plant a tree, guys. That's the proper way to plant a tree. These guys are already rocking and rolling. They've literally got 6 of them planted in the time I've done this video. These guys are always the best out there. Alright guys, if you need anything, as always, you reach us at the sod store there at Tulsa Sod and Mulch, or reach us on the web, tulsasod.com. And I appreciate you guys watching.